We don't want to, we want kids to be aware, not scared. But is there anyone in your life who's making you nervous, anxious, or afraid? So that gets at the anyone. Every time I stand in front of a group of kids and get ready to talk, I think to myself, if I'd had a body safety assembly, if I'd known, if I'd had somebody ask me, is everything okay? Do you feel safe? A lot of doctors and nurses are starting to ask that just with regular checkups. Are you safe in your home? Are you safe in your life? But to ask kids if they need a grown-up's help with anything, and to ask them if anyone, but you have to keep asking.
Welcome to Conversations with Kristi. I'm Kristi McVie, a former WA police officer, specialist child interviewer and child abuse detective. For years I worked on the front lines investigating child sexual abuse, where I saw the risks, the patterns, and most importantly, the ways that we can protect our kids. Now I'm here to share that knowledge with you. This podcast is all about real conversations, giving parents, carers and educators the tools to keep their kids safe, both in person and online. Through survivor stories, expert insights and practical advice, we'll navigate these tough topics together so you feel informed, confident and empowered. Because when we know better, we can do better, and our kids deserve nothing less. Content warning. Some topics and conversations can be triggering for some listeners. Listener discretion is advised as your mental health is important. Please refer to my website and the show notes for available support services. Good morning and welcome back to Conversations with Kristi. Well, it might not be morning for you, but it's morning for me, and I'm here with the wonderful Diane Tarantini, who is all the way over in West Virginia, USA, and it makes me so happy to connect with people from all over the world talking about this. I know it's not a happy subject for some people, but for me, it's happy that we can connect and talk about this all over the world, because every conversation that we're having around these topics is changing our child's safety, it's changing our futures, it's breaking down that generational trauma. So Diane, thank you so much for coming and chatting to me. And I know for anyone who's listening, we've had a little bit of like time zone problems. We didn't know whether we were doing it now or in 12 hours time. It's been an interesting morning. So thanks.
Very glad to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
I love that. I love that when I said, "Hey, I'm here. If you want to jump on," and you're like, "Yep, I'm here." I love that we didn't have to stress about it. And I was explaining to Diane that this is a very like conversational podcast. We're not like strict on what we're talking about. It can go anywhere. So yeah, I hope that people understand just how easy it is, because we don't have to make it all. You know, it is difficult topics, but we don't want to make it so that we, you know, it's not what's the word I'm looking for, it's like we're humans, we've got human lives, we're trying to just do the best we can. And I tell you what, at the moment I'm just doing the best I can. I was explaining to Diane that my husband Brad, he's been in hospital, he's having cancer treatment at the moment, and it's gone haywire. His body's just doing all sorts of weird stuff, and I think he thought he was going to get away with not having like any symptoms from his treatment. And then next thing, bam. And he was totally thrown for a loop. And, you know, he's been in hospital for 4 days now, and he's actually getting released today. Released like he's in prison. He probably thinks it's like prison. But yeah, anyway, so that's enough about me. We're here to talk with Diane about her. She's an author. I'm not going to tell you everything. She's going to tell you all about herself, but she's an author. She's written a children's book and an adult and a memoir. She's a body safety educator, and yeah, doing the work where a lot of people don't want to talk about this stuff, right? So Diane, tell everyone about yourself, because we want to hear all about you.
Okay. I often tell people that ever since the 4th grade, I've known 2 things. 1, I'd get counseling, and 2, I'd write a book. And it's strange when I reflect back that at 9 years old, I knew I'd need professional counseling to get help for what I'd been through. But I also think that knowing, like a friend of mine, it's odd when you write a book like this, a memoir of difficult childhood circumstance. People that have known you for 40 years will read it and go, yeah, how did I not know? And it's just because survivors hide it well until they can't hide it anymore. But one of my friends said, I don't know how you like survived it. And I said, I think the two things that they were like goals. They were like goalposts, and heading towards those, that's what helped me stay sane, kind of thing. But my story is that I was one of four children. My mother was a registered nurse, and my father was a university professor of psychology. And with my siblings, I had a brother. I'm the only girl. I'm the youngest child. I had a brother who was 5 years older than me, and he sexually, emotionally, and physically abused me and another one of our brothers. And I've disclosed 3 different times, like once as a teenager, once when I was pregnant, and then when I went through counseling, and counseling is expensive, so I asked my parents to babysit for my children and to help us afford counseling. But now the line I've been using recently is, as a body safety educator and as an author, and I do live events and I do a lot of education on social media. It's my goal to make lemonade out of the bitter lemons of my childhood. I don't want it to be for nothing. I not to put pressure on anybody, but if you're built to speak publicly and about hard things, this is it's definitely played a significant part in my healing, to help prevent or help people navigate it if it happens in their family. So yeah, I love that your podcast is called Conversations with Kristi, because my number one child safety tip is to have conversations with your children, or the kids you love, whether you're we call them foster parents in the U.S. or an educator, or a grandparent, just to assure a child there's no dumb questions, there's no topic that's off limits, and I am the safe person that loves you deeply and will get you whatever kind of help you need. It's all rooted in conversation, Kristi.
That's why no subject should be taboo in your family. No subject, and why we need to have conversations about these topics, because for so long they've been, no, we didn't talk about it. We don't talk about it. I know I've had survivors come to me and say, when they tried to disclose, they were basically told to shut up and don't go there, and so that's why conversations are so, so vitally important. So yeah, I agree with you.
I don't know if you've heard the statistic. I heard it about 2 years ago, and I often tell it. The average age at which a person will disclose that they experienced sexual trauma as a child is 52 years old.
What? I haven't heard that stat.
So I was 35. I was a really angry mom. I never hit my children, but I yelled a lot. And that's what sent me to the doc and did antidepressants a lot. And then at some point, he was such a dear man. And he just said, sometimes antidepressants are only a Band-Aid for a deeper problem. Is there a deeper problem? And like, so in true. That moment, as a survivor, I had to weigh, do I tell the secret I've kept for 3 decades? Or do I just keep it hidden? Yeah. And I chose to tell, and that got me into counseling, and that just starts your healing journey. And that's one thing I tell kids in body safety assemblies, when I'm in front of like 300. Do y'all call it middle school? Like when they're like
in the middle,
10 to 13 years?
No, we don't. But we hear that term a lot from the US, so we do understand that it's like that tween years, like those in
Yeah.
between years.
Yeah, and I've started doing high school, which is more older kids, like 12 to 17. This year, I used to be afraid of them because I literally
We've got
thought
trauma from school.
I thought I might get heckled. You know, you see like TV shows where kids are just really
Horrible.
brutal, and I was worried. But when when any human authentically and honestly tells their story for the benefit of others, like the chit chat stops.
Yeah.
And just this year, and this has been so beautiful, and maybe it's because I'm adding in like the missing link, because I've always told them I'm a survivor of child sexual abuse. It was familial, intrafamilial sexual abuse, incest. It was peer to peer. It was another kid. And I tell the kids, I look them in their 300 pairs of eyes. I said, kids, listen to me. This is one of the fastest growing categories of child sexual abuse is kids doing it to kids.
Yes.
And I tell them one of the reasons I want you to disclose is because this creates a significant emotional wound. And you are going to need a professional to help you through the anger, resist the urge to self-medicate. We see all kinds of ramifications of suicidal ideation. There's a lot of it's so hard to be a young person these days.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, yes.
And then add on like the trauma and the wound of like being abused in the home by a parent or a sibling or someone in your home that should be keeping you safe, should not be doing that, So,
yes.
Yeah, it has lifelong ramifications.
It really does. I've done, I quote Darkness to Light all the time. Are you familiar with that organization? I love their statistics. No. And they've got a statistic that I use a lot. I think it's an old statistic, and I think it needs to be, research needs to be done. They say that of all child sexual abuse, 34% of the incidents are initiated by family, either primary or, extended family. I had a woman, I was at a conference in Washington, D.C. last summer, and I had a woman from Tennessee come up to me and say, she had a much more Southern accent than I did, and she said, in Tennessee, it's 60%. So, and it's a David Finkelhor statistic, but it's from 2012, that 34%.
Yeah.
We've
got updated statistics in Australia from...
You do?
Yeah, so there was a research by the Australian Bureau of Statistics in Australia. And I mean, look, there definitely needs to be more research, but the research showed that for females, for girls, it's 47% of 47% of abuse is by a family member, 25% by extended family, 15% by fathers, and 6% by brothers or stepbrothers.
Oh my goodness. I'm going to ask you to send me those stats.
Yeah, I will.
Yeah, that's in the peer groups I'm in. I am in one that's nothing but siblings, sexual abuse, and trauma survivors. But in every other peer group, the most common pairing is father-daughter.
Yeah.
And I know we're not supposed to compare our trauma experiences, but I tell you what, when I think of a father, especially a blood relative father, it's a gut punch to me. I can't imagine that. But then other people are like, oh my gosh, it was your brother, ew, which is what the school kids often do, and I just give them permission. I'm like, it's
uncomfortable and it's gross and it's like it shouldn't happen, and but it does, and
yes,
before we started recording, I mentioned how we don't in policing, in investigation work, I did have some cases where it was stepbrothers or brothers, but it wasn't usually the parents who were bringing their children to the police station, reporting the abuse. It was either historical, or it was so years gone by when they were an adult and they were reporting it, or if it was in real time when it was actually happening, it was because the victim survivor was actually reporting it and to a safe adult outside of the home, so someone else. And so it would be like a teacher or a coach or a friend's parent or something would report the sibling sexual abuse, and then it would be a mandatory report and police would get involved. But, in those cases, parents are like, what do I do? My 15-year-old son is abusing my 10-year-old daughter. Like, what do I do with this? It's a nightmare. And they're quite often they stand with the abuser or the perpetrator because, both children needed support, and the victim's getting support in the fact that they've said something, but the perpetrator, well, why is he doing, and I don't think we actually understand why a lot. Not so much why, but, like you said, it's the growing. I mean, the stats are very up and down, but it's about 30 to 50% of all child sexual abuse is by another child. But every time I talk about it, I get parent after parent telling me that their children are being abused in daycare centers, childcare centers, early childhood education. They're being abused by other children, and we're considering it. We use the terminology harmful sexualized behaviors in Australia as, as an explanation. So a child is harming another child. So, and the thing is that I always put it back to them and say, this is terrible, support your child, but what's happening in that home of that child who's actually doing it? No 5-year-old knows to go and insert things. Yes, they can sell. Anyways, like, we're going off track, but I think what it is that we just don't think, parents don't think that we need to educate our children as young as 2 and 3 years old about this stuff and how to educate it.
Yeah, we had a school, we did 5 in one day last month, and the school asked us not to talk about sexting with the 5th graders. And
but
we're
they're
like,
doing it.
Or consent. They didn't want us to cover either topic. But
consent is in everything.
Yeah. Peter Yates talks about this. He says one thing we're finding is that grown-ups, including professionals and social workers, have a hard time grasping that a child can harm a child sexually. They just believe that little kids are sweet and innocent and wouldn't do anything to anybody's private parts, but it is happening.
Especially with the fact that we've got such unrestricted, unsupervised access to the internet with most kids today, and they've got access to seeing adult content that they wouldn't usually see. We've got older siblings and older kids showing things that they see to younger children. They do it to each other because it's what they've seen. It's not like, and also, it gets written off or it gets just dismissed by, it's just kids being kids. No, I'm sorry, it's not kids being kids. Kids don't do this to each other unless they have they've been shown it or seen it.
Yeah, I did. I attended Darkness to Light's virtual conference during the pandemic, and it was the first time I'd heard a number higher than 40%. That was the number that I'd always heard as I started being a body safety educator. And then 3 times, in the course of 3 days, they said it could be as high as 70%. So, my first degree at university was journalism, and I have a blog. And so I just did the research to find out why is peer-to-peer child-on-child sexual abuse increasing, and it led me to pornography. And unfortunately, one of the most searched themes on pornographic websites is incest or siblings, or
you just have to look at the Pornhub. You just have to look at the Pornhub front page, and it's sister, brother, mum, daughter, mum, son, father, stepdaughter, or whatever, And so it's just and there's so many of those categories, and it's just well, what if that's what people are seeing, and if that's, And then, you talk about not talking about sexting and not talking about consent. But if this is how our children are learning about sex because we're not talking about it and we're not having those conversations, then they go to porn and that's what they're seeing. And then I have this theory that we're going to see a massive increase in child exploitation and child abuse because of the unrestricted by younger men. It's get the age, we used to see dirty old men.
Yes.
They were now we've got men in their 20s, being charged with having child abuse material on their computers because they're being led there through freaking porn.
Yes.
I mean, I'm not saying that is like it's not an excuse, but I'm saying that where are we leading our men? Where are we leading our young boys and our men if we're not having these conversations and sharing with them why we need to be careful what we're consuming and why this is dangerous?
There was a source that I used. I thought it was going to be one blog post and it ended up being 3, but there was a source that I think they interviewed about 1,500 teens, and it was the Common Sense Media Report on Teens and Pornography. And so the first blog post I wrote was, why is your child looking at porn? And sometimes it's a mistake. It just pops up. Sometimes a kid shows it on the bus, but often they're going to it, Kristi, for sex education.
Exactly.
Because the parents aren't teaching it or talking about it, and the schools aren't teaching it or talking about it. But then you and I know that they get way more than they bargained for because they get misogyny, they get racism, and they get the violent and aggressive sex, which I haven't talked about this a lot on podcasts, but I was doing a YouTube sex ed lecture series, and the woman the week before me was talking about the rise of rough sex. I don't know if you've heard about this at all.
Yeah, I have.
She's brilliant. Debbie Herbenick, her book, Yes, Your Kid. I mean, we have teen girls getting choked during making out. That's not okay. And so it's like, just when I think I know everything, just when I think I've heard everything, just when you think it can't get worse. I asked this researcher, I was like, Dr. Debbie, if a school would let me talk about this for 5 minutes during a body safety assembly, what should I say? And she said, they won't let you talk about this. There's no way. But she said, if you could, you have to tell them that sexual choking is strangulation. And it comes with the risk of death and brain damage and losing your sense of smell and sexual trauma. She tells this story. Is this okay to talk about?
Yeah. There will be a content warning at the start, and and people are used to these kinds of conversations in this podcast.
Yeah. She told one story about a young man in a monogamous relationship being asked by his female partner to be choked, strangled, whatever. And Kristi, she lost consciousness for like 3 minutes, and he literally thought he killed his girlfriend. And now he has sexual trauma. Like, I don't know if,
he probably can't get it up anymore.
Right. That's another downside of pornography, right? Like, so many young men have erectile dysfunction.
Yeah, and I was just about to say, in my book, just before I left the police, I met an ED nurse in Western Australia, and she was saying that in that week, and I wrote it in my book, that 5 teenage girls had come to the ED with torn anal tears because they had been having anal sex where their partner, which is another teenage boy, didn't know what he was doing, we've got cases in Australia where girls have basically been had to have hysterectomies as teenagers because they've had their whole so we've got cases. We don't even need to keep like going, this is damaging kids. It is damaging kids. It's damaging their future relationships. I had a social worker the other day say to me, she's got a 12-year-old who came to her work because he's got porn addiction. a 12-year-old has got porn addiction, and he is completely petrified that he will never be okay again. And
oh my goodness,
we've got so many issues here, but the reason why we're talking about it is because what we're massively seeing is an increase in peer-on-peer abuse, and it's definitely because of porn. And when I first started,
yes.
and I've said this over and over again, when I first started in the police, when we saw children harming other children, peer-on-peer abuse, we naturally assumed that they had been sexually abused.
Yes.
Because we saw that, right? That was in 2010. In 2020, when I left, we were seeing so many cases of peer-on-peer abuse that and when we investigated it, it was because more often than not, it was because of porn. So in 10 years period, we saw such an increase in peer-based abuse. And so this is the thing. If you don't want your children to harm other children, and this is a big statement I'm about to make, people, if you don't want your child to harm other children, first of all, teach them body safety, talk about consent, and talk about pornography before it's too late, because they will, if they see it, and they don't know these things, they may do it to someone else.
Yes. Yeah, I spoke, oh my goodness, I spoke at a big Catholic church last year, and I do this presentation that's called What Keeps a Body Safety Educator Up at Night. I talk about sextortion, right. I talk about child-on-child sexual abuse, and then I actually do talk about the rough sex component. But there was a woman there, she was a licensed counselor, she was there in case anybody was triggered and needed to talk. And she told me that when it's peer-to-peer, that she read a study that 50% of it, or child on child, minor on minor, 50% of the victims are like your same age peer. But then 50% are the little peewees that just happen to be at hand. Like, I want to do what I just saw. I'm going to show it to you, and we're going to video. Like, there's like so many absolutely horrendous scenarios that like CACs and emergency room nurses are hearing. But that was really interesting. I hadn't heard that specific, that 50% are kind of same age, and maybe a date gone bad, or like after, like, have you heard that like the couple hours after school and before mom and dad get home, those are witching hours. It's just lack of supervision. But we can't. I work with organizations. Some organizations are like, equip the kids. And some organizations are like, it is not the kids' job to keep themselves safe. We've got to keep them safe. And I'm like, you guys, we have to do both. Yeah. We have to do both.
I know. And I don't know about you, but I grew up in, like, my parents were like, see you at dark.
Yeah. Yes. And they'd ring the bell for us.
When the lights come on, you need to be back in this house. And so I could have been running a drug ring for all they knew, and they wouldn't know what I was doing during the day.
Yes.
I mean, and it's only through, and I wasn't, by the way, I was a very, very good girl. I didn't do anything that I wasn't meant to do. I was too scared of my parents. You know, and the thing is that we grew up in in that generation where basically we had no supervision. And then when we were parented, it was only when we fucked up, basically. Like, you were yelled at, screamed at, punished, smacked, whatever it was. Today's generation. And so I think that's kind of left us emotionally stunted, because we don't know how to parent. We think that, do we, some of us, I'm saying some of us because, some of us are like completely the opposite. We're controlling everything because we didn't have any control when we were kids. Yes. Or we're just, a lot of parents are now just giving it like hands off. This is what my parents did, so there has to be a little bit, like you said. I get criticized if I don't mention it's not a child's job to, protect themselves. It's not a child's job to protect themselves from child abuse, but we can't leave them with no idea what's happening to them, because I talk about it in my social media. Some kids don't even know they're being abused because they've been groomed.
Exactly.
And they just think that this is normal. And a lot of people, and I'm sure you speak to survivors about this as well, it's not until they become an adult or they become a teen and they realize that wasn't normal. That's not actually what people do, but it was normal for them as a child.
So that's the importance of body safety assemblies, in my opinion. Because I believe that when I stand in front of kids and tell them no one, and I've tweaked this recently, no one, not a stranger, not a friend, not a family member, should look at, touch, or take pictures of your bathing suit body parts, your private parts. Because I've got to get the family in there. Yeah. You got to get your, family covers incest, friends covers peer-to-peer, and stranger covers stranger danger, which is really not a thing.
Not as much as
but I believe that if the abuse is intrafamilial incest and it's caused by an adult, the adult is in the position to world build, to tell you what's right, to tell you what's wrong. All fathers do this. I'm getting you ready for when you get married someday. Or this is just a little game we do. This is what happens in families. And so for me and my partner to stand in front and say it's illegal, it's stinking illegal for a grown-up to do anything of a sexual nature with a child. And now also with peer-to-peer, there can be prosecution depending on where you live. We can re-educate them in the event that they've been taught incorrectly, incorrect values.
Well, and that's what perpetrators do. They groom. And, kids can even groom each other. So it's not that, it's because they, if we see statistically with the peer-to-peer abuse, harmful sexualized behaviors, the most common age that is harming other children. So if we look at the most common age is the prepubescent, pubescent age. So the 10 to 15-ish age. The most likely victim or the child being harmed is the 3 to 9. So we're looking at children who are going through puberty, harming children who are younger, don't have knowledge, are naive, and they don't know what's happening, or they don't have the power the strength and power to control what's happening. They can't, and then so, if you've got a 10-plus-year-old child saying, and they've seen it, they're going through puberty, they've got those urges. And this is the thing that I want parents to understand, anyone listening to understand. Children don't get to 18 and then all of a sudden I'm a sexual being.
Right.
We're seeing children who, we know that children as young as 2 and 3 masturbate because they realize that their genitals feel good when they touch them.
Yes.
Right? So, and it's not that it's bad, wrong, or anything else. It's that we just need to educate them that this is a private part and we do these things in private, that we don't do it to anyone else and they don't do it to us. Yes. And as they progress, we talk about the fact that, these are, like you said, no one, stranger, peer, or family touches our private parts, takes a video or looks at it. And that's because this is our body and we teach body autonomy. It's not even a thing when you start these conversations at a very young age. It's not even a thing. Kids aren't scared. They're just like, no, my body is my body. And
it's a weird thing to comprehend, a child grooming another child. But when I was doing developmental edits to my memoir, I did a deep dive into a whole bunch of emails that my brother, who was also abused, sent me. And I say this in the book, but and I would never give details because I think humans will fill in all those details. So you don't need to get super specific or graphic about abuse. But he tells the story of our older brother saying, if you do this, I'll play flashlight tag with you.
See, that's grooming.
And it broke my heart. That gives you a snapshot in time. When you think back, I was totally in grade school when I was playing flashlight tag. And for that to be the lure, just to spend time with your big brother, outside with the fireflies, that, kids can groom. And some of it is just instinctive.
Well, it's about them getting what they want, so they'll give you what you want.
It's about them getting what they want.
And whatever, And whatever was going through your big brother's mind at that time, he only cared about what he wanted. And
Right.
so he was only worried about what he wanted. And, you know, at whatever cost, whatever I need to do to get what I want. And so whether we can't, you know, I don't know the full story of your, you know, and I'd love to ask more questions about it, but, you know, whatever reason he had that for doing that and for saying that, he knew what he was doing. He knew,
Yes.
because he was bartering and he was dangling a carrot in front of him. So that is intent.
Yeah, that's another thing. Gosh, I this fabulous developmental editor. I interviewed 3 and I picked one. She was an American living in France. And I did Zooms with the 3 of them and then picked the one who I thought would do the best job. And she said, I know my mother's a survivor. She's never told me much. And I feel like this project would help me understand more. And she goes, and I have so many psychotherapists in my family. I think it might come in handy, like if you need somebody to weigh in on something. But as she ended up sending me like 30 different questions, which in writing we call those are the gaps, right to the gaps. Like you literally have someone telling you, you forgot to say this. I need to know more about this. How old were you here? And I realized that and it's kind of goes without saying, but I wasn't just me and my brother weren't just sexually abused. We were also emotionally abused, just bullied like you wouldn't believe, and physically abused, just like. And there's a scene in my book, and it's verbatim from an email my fellow abuser brother wrote me that like there was a time when our brother, who was so powerful and like just full of himself and anger and energy, like was chasing my brother and just beating the crap out of him, and ended up in the living room at my mom's feet as she's smoking her cigarette and watching her soap opera and drinking her diet pop, and she doesn't do anything. And I had this, I literally like opened up a tab and said, can domestic violence be between siblings?
Yes,
because I thought you think of intimate partner violence.
Yeah.
You think of the husband and wife, the boyfriend and girlfriend, the mom and stepdad. And of course I got it absolutely, it's in the domestic situation. It can be, it
But
can be
it didn't occur to you till then, did it?
It didn't occur to me. And another thing, oh my gosh, I was like, if my parents didn't stop the violence, that's neglect.
It is. So many issues there.
And it's
why?
like,
Why
we're like middle class
do
America. My dad had 3 degrees, like one from Harvard, a PhD in psychology. And that's a myth that needs to be busted right there, that this kind of stuff only happens in poor families or
low socioeconomic
uneducated.
or uneducated. I know. And I actually, so 2 things to all of that. I actually have been quoted as saying, generally the worst people who to deal with these situations are teachers and educators. Like, because that, I think they have they literally, they just check out. I think your parents checked out.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh well, yeah. So my mom had bipolar disorder, and she was like, yeah, she did a couple stints in the hospital, and then later when my dad passed, it was me that was admitting her to the psych ward. And then my dad was, I loved him so much, had him on a pedestal, but he was emotionally unavailable. He worked, ate dinner, and then went down in the basement and did his hobby.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
Yeah. Emotionally unavailable is, and I mean, sadly, because there's so much trauma around this, we're seeing another generation of emotionally unavailable parents now because we've got devices. And look, I don't want to get into the whole device thing, but
yes,
we can now check out with a phone. Our parents checked out with drugs, alcohol, and drinking, and not like don't the words I used to hear was, don't annoy your father.
Oh yeah.
Don't go and annoy your father. Like, there was no, and not, and like I love my dad to pieces. He's a beautiful human. I'm sure like my dad's on a pedestal as well. But he was emotionally checked out. So was my mum. So was my stepmom. So was like all of the adults around us were checked out, and they checked out through substance abuse or through hobbies or through soap operas or watching the news around the dinner table instead of turning it off, and like they just didn't connect with their kids.
Yes.
And now we've got a different generation who are doing a similar thing. Some of us are working really hard to break that cycle, but we've got a whole nother generation of parents who are checking out through another reason. And that's because we don't talk about trauma enough. And your dad should have known better.
So, yeah, I tell people that like his PhD was in psychometrics, which is psychological testing. So he wasn't steeped in therapy.
Okay.
And counseling.
Yeah,
he was like more on the research side.
Huh? He would have done some of that in one of those degrees.
Yeah, it is ironic. Yes, it did. It's occurred to me a lot of times that it's quite ironic that my dad was a psychology professor and we were so incredibly dysfunctional as a family.
Oh, but I've spoken to survivors whose parents were, pastors, and they were heads of churches, and and both parents, like mother and father, were like, in the Anglican church, and their both parents were completely abusing them in the background, like father and daughter, siblings were abusing, and and then in the community they were this pious, very high up, put on a pedestal people, and they were like, and again they were like Googling, is this abuse? And it wasn't until they asked me, I was like, do you realize that is like psychological abuse? This is that. And, but yeah, it was because that they were on this pedestal and everyone believed that they were, and this is why it's a problem when we put people on pedestals, right? It's a problem when we think that the police, teachers, all of these people who are in positions of power and authority are actually, that we shouldn't question them.
Yes.
Because everyone, in my experience, anyone can be a child sex offender. Anyone can be. It's not everyone, but it can be anyone. And it doesn't matter what job they're in.
Yes, exactly. I saw I actually organized a child safety summit here in my own town with a couple of other child safety professionals, and one of our speakers his topic was when the abuser carries a Bible, and it was one of the most brilliant presentations I've ever seen.
Wow.
Because he just said,
that's giving me chills, because we're not Australians aren't as like religion isn't a massive thing in Australia, because we do have obviously religious sections and stuff like that, but we're just not as religious in Australia. So, but it's the same with like police. Like I get a lot of, because I'm ex-police and ex-detective, I get like, police are pigs, police do it, they're the biggest pedophiles, and I'm like, well, actually, like they're no more than any other section of the community. Like they're everywhere. They're in every job, every place, everywhere.
Yeah, and especially places they can have contact with kids.
Exactly. Yeah. So, Diane, I'd love to hear more about, so I know that a lot of survivors, you've obviously done the whole part. You said, I knew when I was 9 years old that I would write a book and I would need therapy. Now, that is an intro that I've never heard before, so that was pretty cool. But I guess what I wanted to ask is, when did you started therapy when you became a parent? Is that right?
On my third child, yeah. Let's see. So after second little girl was born and I was yelling a lot, I went in for the antidepressant. And then we had our third child and I went off the antidepressants because I didn't want to have any pharmaceuticals in my body when I was pregnant. And I thought maybe it won't come back. My doctor had called it moderate depression. It wasn't clinical, thank goodness. And
it was situational.
Yeah. So I started therapy when our son was 2 months old. And it was anger. I tell people, I believe anger is one of the main things you can look for, because I just feel that you have so much rage because you had no control over your circumstance. And I wanted to control like my children. It was just like displaced control. And so I didn't want my kid, I called myself mean mommy, and I didn't want my kids to look back on their childhood and call me mean mommy. And so that's why I disclosed to the doctor, and he wrote me that day. He wrote me my prescription for my antidepressant, and then he used the same prescription pad and just kept tearing off sheets and writing on the back, a psychologist, a psychotherapist, a psychiatrist, a clinic, a counseling practice. And he goes, just
do one of them, any of them.
Just go through them until you find the right fit. And thankfully for me, the first one was the right fit, and it was a counseling practice that specialized in PTSD.
Oh, wow. Yeah, because you would have had PTSD. And
yeah,
I'm wondering if so I mentioned this in like other podcasts, and I talk about this. Sometimes parenting is the trigger that, so you might have suppressed. So a lot of people suppress their abuse from childhood. And when they become a parent, it's almost like it slaps you in the face again, and you're reliving things because your child is like you see you in your child, right? And you don't want that to happen to your child. So then all of a sudden, all of these memories start coming up, and a lot of, we don't talk about this enough, because then all of a sudden you've got repressed rage coming out, and you're not coping with your kids. And we've got parents who are struggling with, or mothers who are struggling with postnatal depression and all of the things. So, and then we diagnose them with postnatal depression, but maybe there was something else there.
Yeah.
I remember because I had like abandonment from my mom when she left when I was 7. I had this massive abandonment issue, like trauma and wound. And when I was pregnant with my daughter, I was having nightmares like all through my pregnancy about just leaving my daughter places. Or I didn't know I was having a daughter. I just knew I was having a baby, and we didn't know until she was born. And I was leaving my baby in like post offices and shopping centers, and I would drive off and leave her, and then I would come back, and the baby would be missing, and I'd be searching, and I'd be crying. I'd be sobbing in my sleep. And I think that was just because I'd never really actually dealt with the abandonment trauma that I had from that instance. Yes. And then but that was, and I had other traumas over the years, and when my daughter hit those ages, these were all different traumas. They just came up again, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. Like, so yeah, it's really important, I think, for people to realize that once you have kids, it changes the game for you.
I'm going to read something from my book. Can I do that?
Yeah, I can't wait.
Because this is exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And it wasn't in the original book, in my developmental or manuscript. My developmental editor asked me to put it to put it in, because this was exactly what you're talking about, my inciting incident as a young mother. And it's the prologue. I remember in the first home my husband Chad and I owned. The year was 1993. Our firstborn child would soon turn 2. I just lifted her from the bath and patted her dry. Still in her hooded towel, she flitted around the bathroom on her tiptoes, performing what we called her the doot-doot dance, named after the silly song she sang during this ritual. All damp, velvety innocence in the steam-filled bathroom. My stare became a squint, then a grimace as a thought came suddenly to mind. A knowing, this is what I looked like when it began. My body boasted no curves, no breasts, no hips, no hair anywhere other than on my head. I was only a little girl when my older brother began sneaking into my room at night. So that was 93, and I squashed it until the year 2000, like 2000 is when I disclosed to my doctor. So even though you had that mama bear moment, it it takes so much courage to ask for help. And I knew, like, part of the reason, like, there were times I just said, it's going to be too scary. I can't do it right now. It's going to be expensive. I can't do it right now. I don't have the time and energy. I mean, like, you've done counseling and all that stuff, right?
For my whole life.
it takes a time commitment, and
it takes bravery as well.
And it's expensive. And I remember not wanting to be hypnotized because I was afraid that I'd recover stuff I didn't know. And I never was. I had EMDR when it very first started, but I felt like my brain, there's that Jack Nicholson and Tom Cruise movie where Jack Nicholson says, "You can't handle the truth." Yeah. And I felt like my brain is only giving me what I can handle. So I didn't want to uncover more. And I don't think that I think my therapy experience was still valid, even if I didn't go digging too deep.
And you never know. Like, I have people come to me and they're like, I think I had something happen when I was a little, and I talk about, and you might know more, you might be able to add something to this. I have parents come to me and they've got children who are under 3 and something's happened and they're like, oh my God. And I'm like, well, in actual fact, if you don't mention it again, they won't remember it, but their body might. Because under 3, our brain is pruning so quickly. They're pruning all of the neurons and like all of the nerve, and like it's happening so fast. You're developmenting so fast. So this is why in most cases, and I only learned this after I left the police, but during the police, we didn't interview children under the age of 3 because it could have happened one day and they won't remember it the next. But we've got people who are saying, I think something happened. I have like this distant memory, but I can't, like, when you've got a memory and you can't grab it and you can't pull it out, you just know something's happened. And so, sadly, a lot of parents are like, what do I do about the fact that, and I'm like, well, first of all, they will probably forget as long as you don't keep reminding them. And you give them love, support, and everything that they need. But mind you, it might come out in behavior, it might come out in other ways, so it's just so hard for it's just, and that's only when it's a one-off incident or something like in a childcare center or stuff. But it is really hard because the body always remembers. I'm sure, like, for you,
body keeps the score.
The body keeps the score. Everything that happens in our lifetime, if we don't heal, when I left the police with PTSD, my doctor wanted to medicate me for anxiety and depression and everything like that, and I just kept saying I need to feel it to heal it. And I was so there was so many bad days, and I just kept saying I need to get through this to get to the other side. Like, I don't know what kept me going, because I was like ready to give up at some stages. I thought the world's better off without me. All of those things that you feel when you're going through like severe trauma and severe depression, etc. But I think that's the thing that we need, whatever you need to do to get through. But at the end of the day, you still have to go through it.
Yep.
You can't just bypass it. You can't go around it. You can't go under it or over it. You have to go through it. And so however you need to do it, like going to therapy, I've been going to therapy my whole adult life. And on and off, like you, sometimes you can't afford it. Sometimes you have to have a big break between it. But it's the best thing that I've ever done, because it's got me to where I am today, where I can talk about stuff and I can be here for other people and I can be here for my own family.
I've heard so many people talking about like getting these miracle breakthroughs with EMDR. And I didn't have that, but it was at the very, very beginning. She would do the finger wag and she would videotape me, and she told me to watch it. I never did. I just kept the videotapes in a box in the basement. I never watched them. But now that people are saying like what a great experience they're having with EMDR, I've thought I want to
Maybe
go
you should go
back
back.
to do a check-in. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
They have this like little device now.
that's what I've heard.
I know.
Yeah,
And so you were right at the cutting edge of
I
EMDR
was.
therapy. Just for
Yeah.
anyone listening who hasn't heard, because a lot of people still don't know about EMDR therapy. What is it about? Like, what is it meant to do?
Okay. As I understand it, as it was explained to me, when you experience trauma, it resides in one part of your brain. And in order to get to the other side, you have to process it. And like my lady would do her finger and you'd focus on it. And some people I think have used a metronome, swinging a baseball bat for little athletic boys and girls. And then you're supposed to recall one of the incidents and describe it. And that is helping the trauma cross to the other side of the brain, like to digest it. It's not like this. Am I describing it right? Is that what EMDR is? It just helps
Well,
the trauma go from
it's
left
to
to
do
right.
with so it's to do with the fact that, and my daughter's had it actually because she had a trauma that happened from seeing our cat get run over. And yeah, our cat, and she was only 5 at the time, and she saw it was right in front of us. And then every time she saw like a animal on the side of the road that had been hit by a car or anything, she was like having this, and she was getting closer to getting her license. And I was really worried that she would like freak out if something ran out in front of her. So we went and she's been seeing a therapist since she was a young kid as well, for just because sometimes we need someone to talk to that isn't our family and doesn't give us their opinions. And anyway, so she went to this did this EMDR, and honestly, it switches off the emotion. So basically because there's emotion attached to the memory. And so what it does is it helps the body release the emotion attached to the memory. So the memory's there without the emotion attached to it. And I'm not sure, it's got to do with the eye movement. And that's why you were following the finger. But now they use like little things in your hands, and it's basically sending a electric current through your body from one side to the other, and that's, you recall the memory, and it basically switches off the connection, like it undoes the neuron that connects the memory to the emotion, something like that. I might be doing a disservice. If I have, please put it in the comments, maybe go Google it. But it is for some people, if it's a one-off incident, or if it doesn't work with complex trauma. So it doesn't work with massive amounts of trauma. If you can pinpoint one incident, for instance, I've got complex trauma from vicarious trauma, lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of memories.
Wow.
So, but it will work for my daughter who had that one memory that was creating trauma. If you have one particular memory that is the one that you get really emotional over, it'll work. I would just recommend trying it. It's not something you shouldn't try.
Yeah. I definitely want to do it.
Because I think for survivors, the most frustrating part of, all of this stuff is the hold it has over you, right? Like it can stop you in your tracks from doing and living your best life. So if you can, if you could get rid of all of the emotion behind it, then maybe you could get on with doing what you want to do.
Yeah, so it's interesting. My brother, who was also abused, has never had therapy. And we're no contact at the moment because he went back into relationship with our brother who caused harm. He had the difficult childhood, and then he had a terrible marriage. And I recommended it to him so many times, and my husband did as well. But he never did it, and it's just clear to me, just through that one example, how what a bad idea it is to not get help for an emotional trauma.
I would say the reason why first of all, men can be really hopeless. Sorry, guys. You can be really bad at getting help because you think that you need to be the tough, the provider, all of that. Second of all, it's probably why he has contact with his abuser, because the fact is that he doesn't believe he deserves better. He's got like emotional, psychological, and physical sexual abuse. Like he's got the
Yep.
trifecta plus.
Yep.
So he has all of this, all of this connection to that, like he hasn't been able to pull apart and see that he wasn't he's probably got some form of guilt around it. Like there'll be so many things going on, and that's the hard part about sexual abuse, no matter who is your abuser. It's sometimes, and I don't say this without considering, sometimes it's easier to disconnect from your abuser if they're a stranger, because that's a boogeyman.
Yes.
Like that's the boogeyman that, they're not someone who lives in your home, who you love. Because, one of the things that I had to reconcile when I was interviewing children was, sometimes kids still love their abusers, especially if they're family.
Yeah.
And it doesn't make sense to them. Why are they still hurting me? I love them. Why do they hurt me?
Yeah. Yeah, that's someone there was someone on social media who said, like, implied that sibling or child sexual abuse at the hands of a cousin is similar to sibling sexual abuse. And I had someone explain to me, when it's your cousin goes home to their house and their parents, and as a family and a survivor, you can hate them and despise them in a way that you can't when it's your own sibling, when it's your own child that just blew up your family. And the complex like the sitting across the dinner table from your abuser for a solid decade, it's just I can't remember when I heard about the concept of complex trauma. Like, do you have a good definition of that, Kristi?
No. And I mean, complex trauma to me, from just the term, is basically, it's not just one incident, it's multiple over time. It's not easily definable, because a lot of this is the thing, right? When when it can be years that and in your case years that you're being abused by your person, by your perpetrator. It can be over a massive amount of time. That in itself is a trauma. And, not to mention every incident that it happened that you can remember. And sometimes when I was interviewing children and survivors, they blur together. You don't remember the incidents.
Yeah. When you were sitting here saying you've got to think of one incident, and I'm like,
they blur together.
I can't.
It just becomes memory. And it's your brain's way of protecting you. If you had to remember the hundreds of times you're abused, then your brain would probably shut down and you wouldn't be functioning. So in order for you to be functioning, it has to protect you disassociate when it's happening. Your brain stops memorizing the memories. Like, it just basically is protecting you, and that's what your brain does, and it's there to protect you. And it's really hard. I know, I take my hat off to you to be a survivor in this space and to do this work, because a lot of people are struggling to even be able to verbalize what's happened to them. The fact that you can so openly and honestly and clearly talk about it. So I guess my last question for you is what, other than the therapy, what was writing? You've written a kids book. Tell us about the kids book, and then maybe give us some little tips for parents, because I think if anyone's a parent listening and they're worried, people aren't generally worried about their children harming each other, but maybe give some tips around, first of all, how to have a conversation with your kids about it.
I've got lots of ideas. This is a children's book, The Brave Knight. It's probably backwards maybe to y'all.
No, it's great.
And the person who got me started in body safety education, I literally cold called him on Facebook. I said I knew enough about his his nonprofit to know that they always use a survivor in body safety assemblies because children will often disclose to someone with similar lived experience. Right. So I said, I love kids, which could be creepy to say in this industry. I love kids. I have 3 grown ones. I'm comfortable speaking in front of large groups of adults or kids, and I'm a survivor. So I started shadowing their team. And about 6 months in, he said, and I have an MFA in creative nonfiction. Like, nonfiction is my jam. You don't have to plot. But he said, could you, in a non-threatening way, teach kids what grooming is, the process a sexual predator will use to gain the trust of a potential victim and sometimes their family? And I said, I'll think about it. And then in less than a week, I woke up with the idea fully formed in my mind. It's a fairy tale. It's a young girl and a dragon who are best friends until they're not. And so the dragon does classic grooming behavior, isolates, gives gifts, has the child take physical risk or break the parents' rules, has a turn at one point when they are not so nice anymore. But anyway, the book is great. It was a group in my state bought 7,000 copies of the book to give to every foster child, because foster kids are more at risk than children in traditional homes. So that was really cool to write. I thought the memoir would be the first book. But then
you just had to, kids needed it more than your memoir needed to be birthed, I guess.
Yeah. So it's had a really, people love it. And then I wrote the memoir. The thing about the memoir, and a lot of people that I know who have written memoirs, it often takes over 10 years.
It does. Yeah, a long time.
To keep all the notes and to organize the notes and to learn how to write. So it took 10 years to get the memoir out. But I was speaking with, there's a fantastic organization called 5 Waves. They're the premier organization for sibling sexual abuse and trauma. Whether you're a survivor or going through it right now, or a person who caused harm, or parents, or professionals working in child safety or law enforcement, they've got lots of resources. And we were just having a conversation recently. They love that I'm a body safety educator and that I'm talking about this. And I threw out 2 questions that I recommend parents ask kids on a regular basis. And they're like, those are really good questions. So the first one is there anything in your life that you need a grown-up's help with? So whether they're trying to pick their college, or they want to learn to ride a bike, or there's a bully on the school bus, or someone's grabbing their butt in the halls at school, like, I need a grown-up's help with that. So that's a thing. And that question is it's going to make you closer to your child, because you're going to get a glimpse into their world of what their struggles are. And then the other question that I also want parents to ask, and you could alternate these like every other week or once a month, like you don't have to be heavy-handed about it. We want kids to be aware, not scared. But is there anyone in your life who's making you nervous, anxious, or afraid? So that gets at the anyone. And every time I stand in front of a group of kids and get ready to talk, I think to myself, if I'd had a body safety assembly, if I'd had somebody ask me, is everything okay? Do you feel safe? A lot of doctors and nurses are starting to ask that just with regular checkups. Are you safe in your home? Are you safe in your life? But to ask kids if they need a grown-up's help with anything, and to ask them if anyone, but you have to keep asking. My one friend who's a prosecuting attorney tells a story about a teacher who reported to Child Protective Services 19 times, Kristi, and CPS never investigated. because it sounded outlandish. And then the last time they actually sent somebody out to the house. And what do you know? The kid was not lying.
Well, kids don't lie about.
So that's why you keep asking. You must be persistent. Even if they roll their eyes, even if you feel like, oh gosh, I'm getting on their nerves. It's easier to prevent a mess than clean it up.
Yes, preach.
Because healing is a lifelong journey. So just keep them safe so they don't have to heal from this. But those are the two, just constant conversation. No, the woman, Dr. Debbie, that I recommended her book, Yes, Your Kid, she said, have your conversations when you're driving to piano lessons or soccer. When kid's in the back and you're in the front, you don't have eye contact, so it's not super awkward. And you just say, I was listening to the radio and I heard this really crazy story about sextortion. Yeah. Have you ever heard of this? Or
know of anyone?
I know you've been asking questions about dating. Are there any questions you want to know about relationships or physical intimacy? If I don't know the answer, I'll get it for you.
Yeah.
But you've got to make your child and the kids you care about believe that you're safe.
I think also to add to that, you need to have those conversations early on so that it's normal. You don't just start talking to a teenager when they're a teenager and they're not turning to you for advice. They're turning to their friends or the internet. You know, have those conversations when they're little people, when they're, talk all the time with them. What's happening with this friend? Oh, what happened with that? Make it so that they turn to you for the conversation and they can unwind and debrief with you. One of the best times that I loved talking to my daughter was when we were in bed at night, having a cuddle and reading the book, and we'd talk about different stuff. I mean, sometimes, when she was young, it was really early on, and, then I got mum time afterwards. But as a teenager, sometimes this happens at 11 o'clock at night, and I'm like,
yes, take it when you can get it. Yep.
Yeah, like halfway rolling your eyes going, oh, why'd you wait till now? But this is when they feel safe to talk and they need to talk. So I 150% agree with you. And I'm so glad that other people are saying in the car. That's when I had all my big conversations. And actually I had my daughter's having some, she's final year of school. So, it's a big year. And I said to her, can we talk about this? And she said, well, can we go for a drive? And so she wanted to go for it. She goes, I like having my big conversations in the car.
That's amazing. She's telling you what she wants. That's a beautiful thing. But that's really interesting. I wonder if it was the side by side is easier.
It's calm and peaceful. Yeah, I think it's just calming and peaceful. Like, we do a lot of talking in bed, but we never sit across from each other to talk about big things.
That's fascinating. Yeah.
Always
and body safety books. Yeah, there's so many great body safety books. On the topic of pornography, are you familiar with Good Pictures, Bad Pictures?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was on a panel with Kristen Jensen last summer. And there's a book for teens and a book for little people. It's the best. It's the best.
Also, we just need to also be mindful when we're having conversations with our kids, good and bad, sometimes can make kids feel ashamed. So it can be safe and unsafe. We can use that language as well. I think that's really important.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. This was for pictures, but you're right. We've stopped saying good touch, bad touch. It's safe touch, unsafe touch.
Yeah. Yes.
Because it can feel good sometimes.
Exactly. And it's confusing. I mean, look, as long as we're taught, and this is the other thing I'd say you would agree with. It's not about what you're saying. It's about how you say it. If you're calm, you're peaceful. Yes. If you're stumbling over your words saying, oh my gosh, mummy doesn't actually know how to say this because no one talked to her about that. But I'm trying, it's really important. Maybe you can help me out here. Just being human about it. We don't have to be perfect. We just have to try.
Yeah. Even when you're receiving a disclosure, and you know this, you can't have the shock and awe face on.
No.
You kind of have to just receive it. And be that calm presence. You can't say I'm going to kill them because they might love the person who's harming them. Yeah, you just have. You're right. So the same demeanor when you're receiving a disclosure or when you're talking about big topics is just open and honest and measured.
And if
Yeah.
you make a mistake, and you just go back and you say, you know what, I don't like how and I've done this so many times. Gosh, I've like mama bears like blown up about, the bullying or something, and then I've gone, actually that's not helpful. Gone back and said, look, I didn't actually cope with that very well. I didn't react very well. I'm so sorry. Like, you were trying to tell me something important and I didn't listen properly, or whatever. And I think that's the thing. Like, we're humans, we're learning.
I
My
think
daughter
apologizing to your kids is super important.
oh
I
yeah.
did that to all my grown kids. I was like, so I was going through therapy and I had a short fuse and I didn't mother you as well as
I said the same thing
yeah.
today. I said, my daughter was sitting here and I said, one day you're probably going to look back and go, you left me with trauma. And I said, and I said, and I'm sorry. And whenever you want to like come to me and talk to me about it, if it ever comes up for you, I'm here to listen, and I'm sorry, like sometimes I don't think I parented you very well. It actually was a conversation I had before we jumped on. So, and she's only 17, but I think the thing is that why it's important is because, we do the best we can in the moment, but we're not always going to do the best that they need. We think we're doing the best, but they might not think we're doing the best. And it's not about us.
Oh my goodness. There's this line in my book. Do you know, and I don't know if I'm going to say his name right. Gabor Mate?
Yes, perfect.
Okay. I watched a video of him. I can't remember if it was before or after I wrote the book. Because my mom's token phrase was, I did the best I could. And Gabor Mate says, they may have done the best they could, but that doesn't mean it was enough for the child. And I said, there you are. That, and as I reflected and wrote and have more understanding and empathy for my mother, I realized that she probably did the best she could. It just wasn't
enough.
It wasn't enough. Oh my goodness.
That's a whole nother podcast, I think.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure that listeners will want to find you and learn more about you and grab your books. So tell us how we can find your books.
Okay. The Brave Night and Everyone Was Silent are both on Amazon. You can get signed. Oh gosh, you guys are in Australia. I'm not gonna. Someone ordered a book from Australia and shipping was like $30, and so I refunded her money because it was only $5 shipping on my website, and said, "I love that you wanted to order it from me, but can you please order it from Amazon?"
Yeah, because, it's too much.
Yeah. It'll take you too long to get it. Yeah. So DianeTarantini.com, I have a ton of blog posts about child safety, exit strategies, personal safety plans, safe adults, sibling sexual abuse, the children in pornography blog posts. So DianeTarantini.com.
Yes. I'll put them in the show notes.
I'm on Instagram as Writing Diane T, which I know isn't very catchy, but it's what I am. And I do a lot of reels and a lot of social media posts and carousels on risk factors of child sexual abuse and sibling sexual abuse and how to tell if your child might be going through something hard. But yeah, I think I do my best child safety work on Instagram.
Yeah.
So
that's the best place. Yeah, I'm the same. I do my best child safety work on Instagram as well. But I'm first of all, what an amazing conversation we've had.
Oh my gosh, I love you so much. I want to be, I want to be able to have coffee with you once a month.
Well, we'll talk about that. But yeah, we will make sure that everything's in the show notes and people can find you. And I think, Diane, I would love to keep in touch and we can talk about these topics again, or more about these topics, because I think from your experience, plus your lived experience, as well as your work experience, you've got so much to share with parents and with people, and it's really important. And this is a topic that, it's a hard topic to talk about, sibling sexual abuse, but it's a very important topic. It's not the only topic you talk about, but you know what I mean. And, Yeah, and I would highly recommend anyone listening to go and get your memoir, especially that first bit. I just about burst into tears. I've heard many, many stories like that, but the way you just wrote that and just like expressed what you, yeah, left me like goosebumps. And
I'm working on the audiobook, and
are you?
yeah,
It's
my
so much
audio,
fun.
my sound engineer is stepped away for a little while. I need to get back in touch with him to see. It's yeah, I think it's going to be great. But editing.
I recorded my book and it was so much fun, but I when I recorded my book, I did it in a 3-day period, like 16 hours in the recording studio. So for anyone who hasn't listened to my book and goes and reads it or gets it in audio, from the first day to the very end of the book, you can tell my voice changes over the period.
Oh, yeah.
It was so,
Oh my gosh, yes.
I laugh about it now. I should have probably like did it in more weeks, like, betterly.
I think, yeah, I did it in I went over to a friend's house who has a sound studio, and I know from day to day my voice changed, and your reading rhythm changes. So
yeah, I got faster. So if you just listen to the first bit and the last bit, you'll laugh because it sounds like I've become a chipmunk. No, not quite, but
oh my goodness.
Well, thank you so much, Diane. Thanks for staying up so late over there and doing this with me and having this conversation. We'll keep in touch, and
yes,
please, anyone listening, please go and grab Diane's books from Amazon because I think they would be worthwhile to read. I apologize, Diane. I don't have a copy of your book, but I will be getting a copy for sure for my own library. So thank you.
Yeah, that would be great. I think it's helpful. Like, I wrote my book and then I read Brad Watt's book on sibling sexual abuse. I'm like, they're like companion texts. What he wrote confirmed my life experience in our family environment. It's really interesting. If we do show notes, I'll recommend that book.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Education empowers children, strengthens parents, and most importantly, prevents abuse. That's why I do this work, and that's why you're here. So truly, thank you. If you'd like more support or resources, follow me on social media under Kristi McVie or Cape-AU, where you'll find all the links in the show notes. You can also grab a copy of my book, Operation KidSafe, A Detective's Guide to Child Abuse Prevention at www.cape-au.com. where you'll find further resources and self-paced courses to help you in this journey of protecting your kids. If you found this episode valuable, please take a moment to leave a review or share it with someone important. Your support helps more parents and caregivers discover this important information and take action to keep kids safe. Check the show notes for extra links and support, and most importantly, thank you for showing up and taking action to protect your kids. See you next time.